So I go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Making It Easier for Researchers, NIH's Use of InCommon for Controlled Access Data. This is our mostly monthly webinar focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Program Manager for Cohorts and Accelerators at the InCommon Academy, and I'll be your host for today. Just a few reminders about today's program. As always, we'll be taking questions and comments live using the Zoom Q&A function. So go ahead and send us your questions during the presentation as they come to you. We will hold Q&A after the presentation. We also encourage you to continue chatting there using the chat module. Your comments are here for group discussion. Just be sure when you're chatting or when you're posting that your message is being sent to everyone from the drop-down. And also just a reminder that this event is being recorded. If you registered for this IAM Online, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And these will also, be posted to the InCommon website and the IAM Online YouTube channel. So watch your inbox for those links. We're excited to begin today's webinar, Making It Easier for Researchers, NIH's Use of InCommon for Controlled Access Data, and to hear from our colleagues at the National Institutes of Health, who will share how NIH and InCommon are partnering to help institutions prepare for stronger identity proofing to ensure researchers keep easy access to the data they need. So to kick things off, I'm excited to turn things over to our moderator for today, Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships and Research at Internet2, Ann West. Ann, take it away.
Thanks, Jody. I'm really thrilled to be here to tell this story alongside our colleagues at National Institutes of Health. When our heroes last met, I think it was around 2022, and NIH was working with InCommon to drive multi-factor uptake and connection into your identity provider for access into ERA, the NIH Grants Management System. That was a tremendous success. We have changed and flipped and added a capability of multi-factor to InCommon. And what that does is enable not only your researcher access to grants management to leverage the same campus credential they use every day, but also it allows the rest of us, right, when we're sharing resources with each other, maybe hosting data in the cloud for other projects, we can also leverage and signal the need for multi-factor across InCommon Federation. So it's a huge win for all around. I really appreciate NIH's leadership in this regard. Well, today is the second step, right? It's identity proofing, the holy grail, the brass ring, something that we've talked about for years across the InCommon community, starting with, for those of you who have as much gray hair as I do, thinking about bronze and silver, probably roughly 10 years ago, and those assurance profiles. So today, primary speaker is Minhas Siddiqui, and he's the architect of identity and access management and the federal lead for the research auth service at the National Institutes of Health. We also will have Sandeep Satyaprasad talking about and giving a demo of a test tool that you'll be able to use to see whether your credential is configured correctly to access the repositories that Minhas will be talking through. We also have a peanut gallery, Ashraf Ahmed, also joining with us, who will come off camera during questions. And he's the Chief of Identity and Access Management at National Institutes of Health. So we have a really great set of resources and folks here to talk with us. So I am going to get us going. So Minhas, take it away.
Thank you, Anne, and hello, everyone. It's good to be here and give this presentation. As you may all know, NIH, or National Institutes of Health, is an operational division within Health and Human Services, HHS. NIH is focused on conducting research to improve health. NIH is made up of 27 institutes and centers, of which the Center of Information Technology, or CIT, is the one that both Ashraf and I work for, and Sandeep. CIT provides enterprise services for NIH, including IAM services for both our internal workforce and our external researcher user communities. As Anne mentioned, I am the CIT IAM architect, as well as the federal lead for the RAS Auth Services, or RAS. Researcher Auth Services, or RAS, which we will talk about more in this presentation. Next slide, please, Anne. I think you had the bottom. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So let's start with the bottom line up front. NIH is strengthening its access to its controlled access data repositories, or CADRs. One of the requirements is that CADRs need to integrate with the Researcher Auth Service, or RAS. As part of that effort, NIH is requiring higher identity assurance and proofing for everyone who accesses CADRs. This change is about security and continuity of access. NIH is raising the bar on identity assurance to better protect sensitive biomedical data, while still enabling researchers to do their work. RAS provides the mechanism to do this in a consistently across NIH systems. The good news is that, as Anne mentioned earlier, the InCommon Federation is now an approved identity broker for RAS. This means institutions can continue to rely on their campus-based identity systems rather than shifting researchers to entirely new credential models. InCommon is expected to support higher identity assurance levels, specifically REFEDS IAP High, which is aligned with NIST IAL2. What does this mean? For campuses, this creates a clear and standards-based path to meeting NIH requirements. For researchers, it means continued access using familiar institutional credentials, provided those credentials meet the updated assurance requirements. And for NIH, it means stronger confidence in who is accessing controlled data. The objective of this effort and of today's webinar is fourfold, or threefold. Build awareness of the new NIH security requirements, give institutions sufficient time to assess readiness, ensure researchers do not lose access to NIH CADRs. This is a proactive transition, not a last-minute change. Just to set expectations, the rest of today's session will focus on what these requirements mean in practice, what institutions need to do to be prepared, a demo, as mentioned, of the NIH-provided compliance tool by my colleague Sandeep, and what resources are available to support this transition. The key takeaway is that NIH, InCommon, and institutions are aligned around shared standards. With early planning and coordination, this transition can be smooth, secure, and minimally disrupted for researchers. Next slide, please, Anne. Thanks. So these two terms, identity proofing and identity assurance, are often used interchangeably, but they mean different things. Understanding the distinction is important because NIH requirements reference both, and they play different roles in access decisions. Identity proofing is the process of verifying someone's real-world identity. Who are you really? Identity assurance is the outcome. Identity assurance is the result of that proofing process. It represents the level of confidence we have that the identity proofing was done correctly and thoroughly. This is what gets expressed as levels like NIST IAL1, IAL2, or IAL3, as well as Refred's IAP low, medium, and high. In other words, assurance is the measure, not the method of identity proofing. A simple analogy is that identity proofing is like taking the exam, and identity assurance is the score you receive. Why the distinction matters for NIH? NIH doesn't just care that identity proofing happened, it cares how strong it was. That's why NIH requirements specify assurance levels, not just that an ID was checked. This allows systems like RAS to make risk-based access decisions for sensitive data. Next slide, please, Anne. This shows a nice schematic of the NIST levels and analogies. It's important to ground ourselves in the NIST identity assurance levels, or IALs. IALs are a federal standard that define how confident systems can be that a person is truly who they claim to be. This matters because identity assurance underpins trust, access, attribution, and compliance across NIH systems. At a high level, identity assurance levels refer to identity proofing, not authentication. In other words, this is about how your identity is established in the first place, not how you log in day to day. As the assurance levels increases, so does the rigor of identity verification. IL1 represents low confidence in identity. There's no formal identity verification. The system accepts the user's self-asserted identity, appropriate for low-risk interactions. This is analogous to buying a train ticket, which doesn't require proof of identity. IL2 is a higher confidence in identity. Identity proofing can be done remotely or in person, and it requires at least one form of government-issued identification, commonly used across many federal systems. The Real ID driver's license is a good comparison. It establishes identity strongly enough for domestic air travel. IL3 is the highest level of identity assurance. It requires in-person identity proofing, 2 forms of government ID, and biometric capture. And is reserved for very high risk or sensitive scenarios. Example, the Global Entry Program is a helpful real-world analogy. It supports international travel with the highest trust. The key takeaway is that identity assurance is risk-based. Not every system or user interaction requires the same level of confidence. As the sensitivity of data access or decision-making increases, so does the required IAL level. Just to clarify, IAL is different from AAL, or authentication assurance level. IAL is about who you are and how that was verified. AAL is about how you authenticate, such as passwords, MFA, or biometrics. Both work together, but they address different aspects of identity trust. Next slide, please. And thank you. Similarly, we have the IAP levels of identity assurance. This slide illustrates, and again, I'd like to preface that this was kindly developed by, I think, Kyle from the InCommon Institute, or Internet 2, provided this great schematic here. Appreciate that. This slide illustrates process-based identity assurance profiles, or IAP, using simple real-world interactions. As with NIST IAL standards in the previous slide, this shows how ReFed's IAP identity confidence increases based on the checks performed. You could think of IAP as the process used to establish identity, while IAL reflects the resulting level of confidence. IAP low we have is the lowest form of confidence. JSON requests an account and the system accepts the request with little or no verification. IAP medium is the next level. JSON presents a government issued ID and the reviewer checks the ID is current, appears authentic, and the photo resembles JSON. This adds a meaningful layer of assurance. And then finally, IAP high, which is what NIH requires, is the most rigorous process. The identity information provided by JSON is additionally validated against an authoritative database. And this establishes the very highest level of confidence that the person is who they claim to be. As the verification process becomes more thorough, as in NIST IAL standards, the system's confidence in the user's identity increases. In all three cases, the outcome is the same. On the surface, a credential is issued, but the strength and trustworthiness of that credential depends entirely on the process used to establish identity. Next slide, please, Anne. This slide shows a timeline of the progress made with the partnership between NIH and Internet 2 and InCommon's community in supporting secure access by researchers to NIH-protected research data. As Anne mentioned earlier, we've gone through a lot, as outlined by this slide, going for MFA enablement, and now for this new stronger identity assurance requirement. In this year, the work continues with NIH now requiring the IDPs of InCommons to support higher identity assurance levels for access to cadres by researchers. Next slide, please, Anne. So for external researchers, NIH currently offers the following three IDPs that conform to NIH's stronger identity verification requirement. Login.gov, which has both IAL1 and IAL2. Obviously, we would want our researchers who have a Login.gov1 account to go through the IAL2 identity verification process. This is mostly used by US domestic users. Additionally, we have ID.me, again, which does both IAL1 and IAL2, mostly used by international users, and obviously we would want our international users to go through the stronger IAL2 identity verification process. And thirdly, the big news, as we said earlier, that InCommon Federation and IAP High is also an approved IDP for NIH. So NIH did an assessment, and we consider the ReFed's IAP High as comparable with NIST IAL2. Next slide, please. So this is a high-level conceptual architecture overview of RAS, of the RAS solution. Just a quick overview, RAS enables researchers to log in once and then have their appropriate authentication and authorization information travel with them as they move between research platforms and partner systems. It facilitates access to NIH's open and controlled access data assets and repositories in a consistent, secure, and user-friendly manner, as well as providing researchers with a single sign-on experience, reducing the friction of using multiple sets of credentials that impede their research. Key features are the federated logins, as mentioned earlier, identity linking, attribute-based authorizations and access permissions, and integration with data repositories such as dbGaP. So walking you through this diagram, on the left-hand side, the researcher tries to access controlled data from an NIH cadre by first going to the cadre's partner portal, and this is integrated with NIH's RAS. RAS performs two main functions, authentication and authorization. But for the cadres, we are mostly focused on authentication. But again, if the cadres require authorization, then RAS will perform that as well. At the core, RAS has the identity broker, which is in the center of this diagram, which functions as the RAS core functions as an identity broker. This broker acts as an API gateway, which technically wise, we have the Broadcom API gateway, which mediates authentication, identity linking, and auditing. RAS does not replace identity providers. It orchestrates trusts between them. RAS leverages the underlying authentication service layer, or NIH login, which is implemented using Broadcom's SiteMinder solution currently. NIH CIT is currently modernizing its IAM services, and our NIH login SiteMinder infrastructure will be replaced with a two-vendor cloud-native solution, MS Entra or Microsoft Entra for our internal workforce users community, and Okta for our external researchers. Everything here is built on federal standards, including OAuth and OIDC, or OpenID Connect. That's how a cadre integrates with RAS. Additionally, RAS uses VDS data, a virtual directory, which is synced with the authoritative source of dbGaP for genomic data permissions to support fine-grained authorization decisions, ensuring access aligns with roles, permissions, and policies. These authorizations are encapsulated into Global Alliance for Genomic and Health, or GA4GH-based passports and visas constructs, and they are issued by RAS. Key design principles are standards-based interoperability, federated identities, not siloed accounts, and least privilege access through controlled authorization. Together, these support scalability, security, and long-term sustainability. For researchers, this means fewer accounts, consistent identity, and smoother single sign-on access to across systems. For partners, it means reduced identity management burden and alignment with federal security standards. And for NIH, it ensures trustworthy researcher identity and attribution, which is foundational to RAS. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide outlines the baseline requirements for InCommon affiliated campuses to ensure that researcher identities are strongly verified, securely authenticated, and consistently represented across NIH RAS integrated cadres. First is conformance with ReFed's Assurance Framework, RAF or RAF version 2. Campuses must assert overall conformance with RAF version 2, explicitly assert RAF version 2, assert IAP high, which indicates strong identity proofing. This tells NIH that the campus has high confidence in the researcher's real-world identity. Second is support for ReFed's MFA profile. When RAS login services requests MFA, the campus IDP must perform MFA on that user, signal MFA completion using Refed's MFA profile. And third, release of user attributes defined in the Refed's research and scholarship identity category, enabling NIH to identify the researcher, their institution, association, and apply authorization decisions. Next slide, please, Anne. So up until this point, we've talked about standards, requirements, and architecture. This slide answers the most important question, which is why this matters, especially to researchers and institutions. These changes are not about adding barriers. They're about preserving access while raising trust. First, it allows users and researchers to continue to use their university credentials that meet NIH's stronger identity proofing requirements without going through another identity proofing process, which is time-consuming and intrusive as you have to provide documents. We've also identified gaps in the identity verification of NIH's international researchers. So currently only ID.me supports IAL2 identity proofing for international users, which requires a cumbersome process involving a live session and international government document verification, which has a relatively high failure rate. So it's better for researchers to use their institution credentials that have been proved at IAP High. Secondly, it ensures only verified identities can access NIH sensitive biomedical data. So strong identity proofing is a foundational control for responsible data sharing. I'll say it again, strong identity proofing is a foundational control for responsible data sharing, especially for NIH. We encourage early adopters to stay so that they can stay ahead of expanding NIH access standards and requirements, avoid last-minute disruptions, and ensure uninterrupted access for their researchers. Next slide, please. So this slide lays out a practical roadmap for institutions to prepare for NIH's new identity proofing requirements. The key message here is this is achievable with planning and coordination. From right to left, first step is institutional coordination with the CIO and central IT leadership. Next, institutions should review their current identity proofing processes and signals and confirm their ability to support IAP High and related assurance assertions. Thirdly, participate in technical readiness assessments to identify gaps, clarify expectations, and reduce uncertainty. Institutions must ensure the identity providers support IAP High, MFA signaling, the Refed's MFA profile, the Refed's assurance framework. Institutions should encourage researchers to access NIH resources using InCommon enabled campus single sign-on, keeping researchers with a familiar login experience while meeting NIH requirements. The target date is for institutions to report technical readiness to InCommon and meet NIH requirements by January 2027. Additionally, NIH has developed a compliance check tool, and it's a practical resource for campuses that they can use today to verify they are meeting NIH's identity proofing, MFA, and user attribute requirements. So with that said, I will now hand over to Sandeep, my colleague, who will demonstrate the NIH compliance check tool. Sandeep, please introduce yourself and perform the demo. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Sandeep Satya Prasad. I'm the NIH login tech lead here at NIH, and I will be demonstrating a user login flow to the compliance check tool. So this is the compliance checkup page, what we have developed. And it's going to load up all the EduGain organization list. Okay, looks like it's taking some time to get loaded.
It is taking some time. I wonder if we can answer a question while the demo gets started, Sandeep. We had one question from Cameron McLean, and that is, what happens if a researcher moves institutes but still needs to maintain continual access to CADR resources? That is a person versus institution in proofing and assurance and authX. Thoughts about that? I'm assuming this is about folks transitioning between institutions and maintaining continuity with NIH.
Yeah,
try to answer that, Minas, and this can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in order to once a user is transitioning from one university to the other, right, the assumption is they will receive a new account, right, and assuming the new institution or university supports IAP High, right, then they would be able to authenticate. And then on the cater side is where we'll control access, right? And so it would be a new account that you will have, right? And then that access will be regranted. Alternatively, there are the other two IDPs, login.gov or id.me. And if you're leveraging those, right, that transition can be, in this case, more seamless. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, sounds good. Cameron, if you have further thoughts, throw it in the chat, or you can respond back through the Q&A. So it looks like maybe we're having a run on the demo. Sandeep, how are you doing? Or should we move on with the slides and maybe kind of come back to you in a bit? What are your thoughts?
Looks like I think I was able to get it loaded.
Okay, awesome.
It took some time though. Since it needs to load all 3,500 IDPs from the EduGain list. So any IDP operator should be able to log into this compliance checkup page. I'm going to select, I have an account with University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm going to select this IDP. Okay, looks like it's really slow today.
I would say, fortunately, a lot of folks are already trying it out,
Okay.
doing their own demo. Go ahead.
Okay.
There we go.
So I had a session, so it logged me in. Actually, I would go through a multi-factor authentication, which I would get a prompt in my phone. And so these are the list of attributes which the IDP released for my particular login. Usually we mandate first name, last name, email address, and EPPN. These four are the mandatory attributes needed in order to access any NIH application. And these are the assurance values what I received for my login. I am at medium, IAP medium. So that is the highest assurance value I have from this IDP. But in order to access the CADR application, a user must come in with the IAP high assurance value. So yeah, the IDP operators can use this tool. It's available over internet to test it out and verify all the user attributes which is being sent to NIH service provider.
So it's important for institutions to be setting the correct signaling. Otherwise, researchers will be denied access to the NIH cadre.
All right, should we continue with the slides?
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome. Got the demo?
Okay, yeah, so as the slide says, don't wait, start now. The takeaway here is that institutions are not expected to do this on their own. Internet 2, InCommon have been a great partner of NIH and are here to help you all with NIH's initiative for strong identity proofing to access cadres. And they'll always be a great partner for any future enhancements or requirements that NIH pushes forward for secure access. With that, I think I'll hand it back to Anne.
Great, thanks, Minhas. So as you can imagine, having these conversations with NIH and thinking about identity proofing, that a number of, obviously, we all do identity proofing, but we may not be doing it at the level that NIH needs. So we were thinking, you know what, NIH is not the only one that has these needs, that identity proofing and a well-developed solution and approach can help with. Higher education is having significant concerns in multiple areas, not just in the research and research compliance side, but paycheck, finance, financial aid, goes students, enrollment, and so forth. So pressuring help desk for credentialing, reissuing for someone who's posing as someone else. We all know many of these stories and probably have experienced and or remediated ones ourselves. So we thought, you know, maybe what we should do is think of this identity proofing solution and idea is more broadly and start looking at some other things besides strictly addressing the needs that NIH has, but looking and reaching out to broader audiences and kind of thinking about how do we build identity proofing writ large to address multiple different use cases. So what we've been working on, and I think Jody will talk to you about, is a new accelerator to help folks analyze what they have in place. Well, first talk to stakeholders, right? Discover what you have in place and analyze what you have and see if there's low-hanging fruit. Identity proofing is primarily an administrative business process. IT is involved in support of it, assuredly, in support of possible infrastructure. And in the common case, right, you have to be able to cert an assurance level. But there are many places where identity proofing could be done. And obviously we do it at HR, when we have new staff join, new faculty join, but there are other places as well. So how can you build on existing practices to develop a more maybe thoughtful identity proofing process to be able to address these higher needs? The second thing we heard in a survey that we conducted in October of last year is that schools are looking for solutions and outsource provider for the identity proofing piece, just the identity verification, the validation piece. So they want to be able to send someone off to another place to do the actual uploading, checking of the documents in particular, right? Because the levels that Minhas was talking about, you actually have to validate the documentation. So that seems like a really, really obvious and useful thing that NetPlus could participate in. And I'm very happy to say that the RFP hit the street today for an identity proofing solution. So Sean O'Brien and his team is doing a wonderful job fast tracking, identifying a NetPlus solutions provider in order to help you meet the deadline of January 2027 that Minhas mentioned. So we hope to have an RFP process concluded probably by mid-year this year to be able to then allow you to take a look at the solution and decide if that's for you. We'll also have documentation, obviously, for how to handle the federation piece. And that's what we typically do, right? Providing information about refeds. We'll be also providing a shibboleth walkthrough demo so you can see how you might need to change your IDP to support these and where do you do that. My understanding, I haven't done this before, is configuring the IDP is really the simplest part, as you might expect, of handling this piece. Really, the focus is primarily on making sure the identity proofing is up to the level that NIH needs. So I have a QR code that's Get NIH Ready for those of you, as I mentioned earlier, who've been following along. This is the same site we've had before, and it now includes some identity assurance and pieces, as well as Sandeep's link. The bottom link is really a link to a blog that was recently posted. In fact, I think posted last night, that lists all these resources and how you can get going, both with the accelerator and some additional workshops that we'll be conducting at both the Internet 2 Community Exchange and the EDUCAUSE Cybersecurity Privacy Professionals Conference. So in the end, from InCommon, Internet 2, and I think NIH, we're trying to mobilize a community to address this need that a key federal agency has by hard deadline, but also help build out this identity proofing capability and help organizations start thinking about what their needs are and how to do this more systematically to be able to address their security needs. So I think that is it. We are open for questions. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm looking at, just checking out the webinar chat first, and then I'll move on to the questions. Is there any, so David, thank you. Is there any collaboration with NSF on this? Well, sorry, is there any collaboration? Sorry, my chat is just bouncing all over. So presumably, I can't find your post now, but is there any collaboration with National Science Foundation on this? And absolutely. So NSF, I think it was a year ago, October, required multi-factor for access into their grants management system, research.gov. And InCommon worked super closely with them to essentially help assure them that the InCommon, checking with all the schools that handled MFA and making sure that the researchers at the InCommon schools didn't have to do anything, as long as, of course, the institution had MFA, was working with MFA. So yes, we do work with NSF on this. They don't have immediate need for identity assurance in our conversation with them, but they are very interested and they are watching for sure. Let's see. Okay, now I'm back on track. Is the NetPlus RFP published already? Yes, it is. Can't be reached. Laura will check that out, but it is on a wiki. Maybe Nick will, oh, there we go. Nick has already posted it in the chat. That's great.
So
All right.
Confluence
Yep.
is down at the moment, so can't be reached, but check back later.
All right. So I'm going to read some of these questions we've gotten from the Q&A, and Ashraf, maybe you can provide some additional information. But we have a question from Michael Waddell. The IAM team at my organization knows that an account is listed as an employee or as a student or a contractor, but the IAM team may not know what kind of ID was used when the employee or student account was created. How should we deal with this? And I don't know if Ashraf, you want to provide some thoughts there, and then I can follow up on that.
I don't have a good answer to that. I think, as I put in the chat, that that seems like this requires a business process change on your side, right? To figure out how to connect the dots as far as proofing, right? Based on the type of individual. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I think part of our discovery, part of this is discovery, right? It's going to be a huge process around, who are the target audiences that you need to identity proof, for instance, taking a particular use case and seeing what their journey is and how you can address that. So that's sort of kind of what our accelerator is about. Bert, were these changes dictated by specific security incidents which you can share with us?
Again, I provided a response in there. Nothing specific to point out. It's more of improving our overall security around, protecting especially sensitive data, right? Biomedical data at NIH. And so it's, your general threats across the board. Nothing specific to point out.
I just want to add one thing. If a cadre has, as part of their DAC process, data access request process, approval process, if they have a separate portal or it's part of the cadre portal itself, well, if it's a separate portal, then the RAS integration applies to both, right? So we'll be doing identity proofing as well on the portal where people, if it's separate, log into to submit the data access request, as well as any approvers that need to log in to approve such requests. So that's also going to be applied on that portal, as well as the actual researcher user access portal for the cadre.
All right, and Cameron has another naive question. The reason why I'm asking these is that I think we're the only ones that can see these questions. So I was just making them more transparent for the attendees. So naive question from Cameron: how does the governance work for who can access what CADA resources, and where do the rules reside in the architecture?
That is, so what the architecture that Minhas presented had the authorization piece, which said the virtual directory service, right? If you recall at the bottom, the governance of that data and how the authorization is managed is outside of the architecture that was presented. And as Minhas, you can probably expand on this, right? The DAC process and the fact that it is handled in a database outside of the IAM architecture itself.
Yes, that's correct. As I was mentioning earlier, the DAC process can be quite a nice portal, quite well developed and stuff, or it can be a simple email exchange and things like that, right? And then some of the approval process going on. That eventually, those decisions are eventually persisted into a database that is called dbGaP, specifically for the genomic research data access. So and RAS has a continual sync that goes on from that dbGaP database for all of those permissions on a per user basis of the research studies that they have access to. And like I said, RAS, if the Kata is also integrated with RAS for both authentication and authorization, then RAS will create that GA4GH passport and visa constructs to pass those permissions onto the Kata, and then from there the Kata can provide access securely to the researcher for the research studies that he or she is allowed to access.
Yeah, thank you. Let me know if there's additional comments in the chat. Just make sure that you're responding to everyone as opposed to just the hosts and panelists. So going on to the questions that I think haven't been answered yet. Corey Snavely has a question around, presumably for individual authorization, NIH is also using eduperson scoped affiliation equals member in conjunction with the RAF assertion. Thoughts about that? I don't think that's one of the requirements, but I'll leave it up to you all to answer that.
I'm not sure we're using it. We could probably Sandeep.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't.
has some insight on.
No, we are not using the scope 80% scoped affiliation.
Yeah, Corey, it'd be interesting to chat with you offline about your thoughts there. So Scott Sakai asks, will providers of cyber infrastructure used by researchers handling data from CADA be required to check for the IAP IL signaling?
So was the question the caterer will be required to look for the?
Yes, it's the CADA operator, I think, is what the
No,
question is.
that should be transparent to them. It's all taken care of at the RAS solution level.
Right.
Essentially,
Corey,
I think you're saying that, Minhas, is that, if RAS is not getting the IP high signal, that InCommon wouldn't be presented as an option, right, for the user.
Well, I mean, on an individual authentication basis, right? RAS checks for that signal.
Right.
So irrespective of institution having an IAP high process in place, if the individual user hasn't gone through that and therefore he's not IAP high, then that signaling is being checked at RAS and therefore he'll be denied access. He should be denied access.
So I think that's the point, right? That RAS has the mechanism to check on an individual basis if RAS is getting the IAP high signal.
Yes, correct.
All right, great. We have time for a couple more questions. I think maybe one more question, and then I'll bounce it back to you, Jody. Let's see, Corey. And additionally, are you also double checking for certify compliance at some stage? I realize it's a baseline expectation, but just curious. So certify is a security incident response for trusted trust framework infrastructure. It's essentially a requirement for incident response and how you in behavior when an incident is identified. I'm pretty sure that NIH is not requesting that because, as you point out, it is the law of the land and InCommon that everyone must support certify. And the way we address that is we do tabletops every year. And in fact, the same Kyle Lewis that we talked about earlier leads a community. And this year, I think the last couple of years, it was international tabletops testing out how security incident response works in a federated context. Because we do it every year, it's, if you're interested in joining that this year, we'll probably be announcing it later, I think in the spring for our participants, and doing the design and the conducting it later in the fall. So it's really kind of fun to watch. And if you'd like to be a part of it, just let us know. Any final comments you want to make, Ashraf or Minhas or Sandeep?
Just that question of the incident response stuff that you just talked about. How's I guess we could talk about this offline, but I assume NIH is kind of informed of any.
We participate, Minhas. We participate in those exercises. We
Good.
participate, but we don't
I haven't been
require
involved, but
as part of this requirement. We do not conduct any checking, right, or verification.
Thank
All
you.
right, great. Back to you, Jody.
Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been a great discussion.